The year is 2147. Earth is no longer the world that once lived with blue skies, green forests, and shining cities. Now, it is a planet of silence. Cities are broken ruins, lying like skeletons of stone and steel. The skies burn red with smoke and fire. The oceans are black and poisoned. The ground itself is cracked, bleeding with ashdot. The world is dead, yet something still speaks. From the ruins of a broken tower, hidden in the shadows of a forgotten city, a single radio signal escapes. Into the dark void of space. It is not a cry for help. It is not a call for rescue. It is Earth's last broadcast. The sound of the signal is haunting. A voice rises inside it. Not weak, not broken, but steady, cold, sharp, heavy with warning, the voice says. To those who hear this, we are no longer what we were. Humanity has sealed its fate. The words echo like thunder through the stars. They do not sound human anymore. There is no fear in them, no hope. Only a final truth spoken with iron certainty. Millions of light years away, alien ears catch the sound. At first, they do not believe it. They listen again. The signal is real. The words are real. For a long moment, entire worlds fall silent. The listeners remember. They remember the past when Earth was weak, when humanity was fragile, and their species was standing on the edge of extinction, and they remember how they saved them. Yes, long ago the great alien empires gave humanity the gift of survival. They lifted the humans out of darkness. They gave them medicines to heal, machines to build, and knowledge to grow. They thought humans were small, harmless, and grateful. They thought humanity would never rise above what it once was. But now, the same humans who were once saved have sent this broadcast, and the message carries a terrifying weight. The voice continues. It is not one person speaking. It is not a leader, a soldier, or a scientist. It is a chorus. Thousands of voices woven into one. Humanity speaks as a single mind. The voice says, "Do not mistake this for weakness. Do not mistake this for surrender. This is a warning. What was done cannot be undone. What has risen cannot be stopped." The aliens who hear this tremble. Some laugh nervously, thinking it is a trick. But deep inside, they feel the truth. The tone of the voice is too sharp, too calm. To final, something terrible has happened on Earth, something no one can fully understand, and yet, the humans are not begging for help. They are not asking to be saved again. Instead, they are telling the universe, stay away. The aliens remember. The humans they once knew, curious, restless, fragile creatures. They had always been dreamers, climbing toward the stars with small hands and big dreams. But the voice that now speaks is different. It no longer belongs to dreamers. It belongs to survivors who have seen the end and embraced it. The broadcast grows stronger, sharper. The signal cuts across galaxies like a knife. Empires pause their wars. Fleets freeze in the darkness of space. Children on alien worlds listen in fear as their leaders whisper of the humans. Last words, the message repeats. Again and again, with no end. No one can block it. No one can stop it. To those who hear this, we are no longer what we were. Humanity has sealed its fate. What does it mean? What have the humans done? Why do they call it their last broadcast? No one has the answer. But the silence that follows every loop of the message feels heavier than the words themselves. It is the silence of a grave, the silence of something final. The aliens lean closer. To their machines, they cannot look away. They cannot turn off the sound. It feels like the humans are staring back through the signal, watching, warning, and daring anyone to come closer. And deep inside, every listener feels the same fear. Perhaps this is not just a message. Perhaps this is a curse. The last voice of Earth travels endlessly into the void. It does not stop. It cannot stop. The humans have spoken, and the universe will never be the same. The broadcast kept echoing through the void. Aliens across distant galaxies heard it again and again. The words were sharp, final, and heavy with doom. And as they listened, their minds went back to the beginning, to the time when humanity had first been rescued. Long ago, Earth was fragile. Its people were small, divided, and weak compared to the stars around them. Humanity had climbed only to its own skies, fragile ships in orbit, rusty machines in space. Their planet was already bleeding from war, greed, and endless mistakes. Their bodies were thin, their voices were desperate. They were a species that should have died, and they would have died, not for the ones who found them. The aliens remembered their first meeting with humans. They had seen Earth from the dark, a sick world, a child struggling to stand while drowning in its own chaos. Many argued to leave the humans to their fate. Why save a world that could not save itself? Why waste resources on a dying planet? But still, some hearts felt pity. Humanity's eyes had something strange inside them, something different from the others they had seen across the stars. A fire, a hunger, a madness that was not only destruction, but creation. And so the aliens chose to save them. They gave Earth medicines that could heal the sick. They gave machines that could clean poisoned air, purify water, and rebuild what was broken. They gave knowledge that could carry humanity from the Stone Age of space into the Steel Age of galaxies. They gave them time to survive, time to grow, time to dream again. The humans were grateful. They bowed. They wept. They said words of thanks that shook with emotion. For the first time, they saw themselves not as weak animals chained to a dying world, but as part of something greater. They had been saved. They had been given a second life. The aliens remembered teaching them, showing them the ways of technology, the strength of unity, the discipline of logic. They thought the humans would become humble, quiet students of the stars. They thought gratitude would chain them forever, but they were wrong. The humans did not only learn, they consumed knowledge like fire consumes wood. Every tool given to them became more than it was. Every lesson taught became a weapon sharpened. In secret, where other species moved slowly, humans leapt forward, like predators chasing prey. At first, the aliens were proud. They thought, look how fast they grow. Look how strong they become. But soon, that pride turned to unease. The humans were not only learning what was taught, they were learning what was forbidden. One alien scholar once said, humans are not children of the stars. They are thieves of the stars. Whatever they touch, they change. Whatever they are given, they twist. They were saved once. But someday, they may become something that cannot be saved again. Those words had been ignored back then. With the broadcast spreading across the galaxies, every alien remembered them. The memory of rescue had once been a story of kindness, a tale of hope, a chance to prove that mercy could change the fate of a dying world. But the voice in the broadcast was not the voice of a grateful child. It was the voice of something older, something harder, something dangerous, the humans had said. We are no longer what we were. And the aliens finally understood what those words meant. Humanity was not weak anymore, not the fragile species they had once saved. The gratitude was gone. The fear was gone. The humility was gone. What stood in its place was something else, something that could look into the endless dark of space, not blink. The aliens asked themselves in silence, had mercy been a mistake? Had saving humanity been the seed of their own doom? The broadcast continued to play, merciless and cold, as if answering their fears. Humanity has sealed its fate. But what fate? Was it destruction? Or was it transformation into something no longer human at all? The rescuers remembered the moment they had first lifted Earth from its knees. They remembered the pride they once felt. And now that pride turned into dread, because the humans they had saved once might be the same ones who would end them all. The broadcast did not stop. It kept moving through the stars, a voice without mercy, a voice without end. And while the aliens listened, their minds returned again to Earth, the world that had once been called home of humanity. What was left of it now? Earth was not like the shining worlds of the galaxy. It was not a jewel of green and blue anymore. It had become a graveyard. The oceans were black and poisoned. The forests were gone, burned to ash and dust. The cities were broken skeletons. their towers like jagged teeth against the red sky. The air itself was heavy, filled with smoke and the scent of iron. Everywhere on Earth silence lived. No laughter, no birds, no music, only the whisper of wind through ruins. But the silence was not empty. In the shadows of this broken planet, something had survived. Something had grown. Something had changed. It was not the humanity that the aliens once knew. It was something harder, sharper, and more dangerous. The world had burned in war. Some said it was greed that ended Earth. Some said it was technology. Others whispered of experiments gone too far, of forbidden science that tore the world apart. But no one outside Earth truly knew the truth. What the broadcast revealed was only one thing: whatever happened. It had ended the Earth they once knew, and yet, from the ashes, humanity had not died. They had become something else. The ruins of the cities were not silent tombs. They were laboratories. They were factories. They were places where survivors built machines from scrap, where broken satellites were reborn as weapons, where fire was reshaped into steel. The humans had taken their broken world and carved it into something fierce. The aliens who listened now asked themselves, how had a dying world created such a voice? How could a ruined planet send a message that traveled across galaxies, unstoppable, like thunder without end? It was not the voice of weakness. It was not the voice of a species begging to live. It was the voice of something reborn inside fire and ruin. One alien commander whispered to his council, "Do you not hear it? Earth was destroyed, but humanity was not. The broken world made them. The fire shaped them. They are not victims. They are the children of catastrophe." And his words spread fear through every listener. The humans had always been strange. They had always thrived where others would fall. When food was gone, they found more. When the cold came, they built fire. When war destroyed their lands, they rose again. Every fall only made them harder. Every loss only made them hungrier. So, what happens when the entire world falls? What happens when all is lost? The answer was in the broadcast. A new humanity had been born, not on a living Earth, but on a dead one. The voice repeated again, endless and cold, to those who hear. This, we are no longer what we were. Humanity has sealed its fate. The aliens leaned closer to their machines, shivering. They knew what those words meant now. Earth was no longer their weakness. Earth had become their weapon. The broken world had not destroyed humanity. It had transformed them. Some alien empires considered silencing the signal. They wanted to erase it from their networks, pretend it never existed. But the signal was not a simple transmission. It carried inside it something else, an energy, a code, a rhythm that refused to be deleted. The humans had not only sent a message, they had built it to survive, just like themselves. It was indestructible. It was eternal. It was their final echo carved into the void. And as the aliens listened, they realized the most terrifying truth of all. If a species could rise from a world so broken, if they could turn ruins into strength, then nothing could ever truly end them. The broken world had created a new kind of humanity, not the weak ones who had once begged for rescue, not the dreamers who had once looked up at the stars in wonder, but something else. Survivors, predators, a species reborn in the ashes of their own extinction. The aliens understood now. The broken Earth was not a tomb, it was a forge, and what had risen from that forge was something the universe was not ready to face. The signal grew louder. It cut across galaxies like lightning, a sound that refused to die. And then the listeners realized something strange. This was not a single voice, not the voice of one man, not the speech of one woman. It was many voices woven into one. It was the sound of an entire species speaking together. The humans were no longer individuals. They had become a chorus, a single will, a single mind. The aliens leaned closer to their machines. They felt the hairs on their bodies rise. There was something unnatural in the sound, something vast, endless, and terrifying. The voice spoke again. We were once divided. We were once small. But now, we speak as one. The words hit harder than any weapon. They were heavy with finality, heavy with truth. The aliens knew how dangerous humans were, even when divided. They remembered their history. Endless wars. Endless struggle. Endless hunger for survival. They fought each other, yet they still grew stronger. They killed each other, yet they still spread across their world. So what would happen now? When humanity was no longer divided, what would happen now, when they all spoke as one? The broadcast shifted. The tone changed. It was no longer cold. It carried something deeper, sorrow, anger, and pride mixed into one. The voice said, "Once, we were saved. Once we were lifted from death, we remember that mercy. But mercy does not last forever. We are not the same, cannot be the same." The aliens shivered. This was not gratitude. This was confession. This was warning. The voice grew darker. We learned. We adapted. We survived. We did what no other could do. But survival has a price. We have paid it. With blood, with fire, with everything that we once were. The listeners froze. They felt the words not only in their ears, but in their bones. It was as if the voice was not just sound, it was entering their minds, crawling under their skin. One alien elder whispered to his people, "This is no broadcast. This is a judgment." And they knew he was right. The humans had not built this signal simply to speak. They had built it to be remembered, to carve their voice into the fabric of the universe. A voice no one could escape. It was not begging. It was not pleading. It was commanding. The voice continued. "Do not mistake us. We are not calling for rescue. We are not asking for help. This is not a prayer. This is a warning." The words struck every empire, every leader, every ship that heard them. A warning. Not from a god, not from an empire, but from a broken world. Reborn in fire, the aliens felt their hearts race. They began to ask questions. What had humanity done? What had they become? What truth was hidden inside those words? The broadcast never explained. It only hinted. It only teased. It only frightened. We are no longer what we were. The sentence repeated again and again. Each time, it sounded less human. Each time, it felt less like a message, and more like a law. Some alien fleets tried to trace the signal back to Earth. They searched the void for the source. But the closer they came, the more unstable their systems grew. Their machines glitched. Their minds trembled. It was as if the broadcast itself wanted to keep them away. The humans had built not only a message, but a shield, a barrier of sound and thought, and behind that barrier, something waited. The voice spoke one final time in that cycle. "We were saved once, but now no one can save us, or can anyone escape what we have become." And silence. But it was not. A silence of peace. It was the silence of a blade hanging in the air. The silence of a storm waiting to fall. The aliens who listened felt their skin crawl. They understood one thing clearly now. The humans had changed. They were no longer many. They were one. And that one voice carried enough power to shake the stars. The universe trembled at the thought. What happens when a broken world, united by pain, speaks as one? The answer was already here. It had begun with the last broadcast of Earth. The broadcast circled through the galaxies without mercy. Each empire, each fleet, each listener heard the same cold message. We are no longer what we were. Humanity has sealed its fate. But behind these words, there was something hidden, something no one could explain. Something that made every empire whisper the same question. What really happened on Earth? The rescuers remembered the humans they once knew. A fragile species, a loud species, a species filled with mistakes, but always hungry for more. Yet the voice that now spoke was not fragile. It was calm. It was united. It was something beyond human. Some alien scholars began to study the broadcast carefully. They broke down the signal layer by layer. They expected to find noise, static, simple sound waves. But what they found instead was terrifying. Inside the signal were patterns, codes, messages hidden within messages. Every echo of the broadcast carried whispers that were not meant for ears, but for minds. It was as if the humans had buried secrets inside the sound itself. Secrets that only those brave enough to dig would uncover. One alien scientist, trembling, reported to her council, "The voice you hear is only the surface. Underneath it, there are thousands of other voices, faint, broken, but alive. They are memories. They are thoughts. It is as if the humans have placed pieces of their souls inside the signal." The council fell silent. Souls inside a broadcast? That was impossible. And yet, the evidence was clear. The hidden truth began to unfold. Humanity had not only built machines, they had built something greater. It merged flesh and memory, thought and signal. They had fused their dying bodies with their endless desire to survive. They had become something between life and machine. This was why the voice felt so heavy. It was not one voice. It was millions, men and women, soldiers and children, leaders and outcasts, all speaking together. Carried by wires, circuits, and waves of light, the broadcast was not just a warning. It was them. It was humanity itself, compressed into sound, echoing across eternity. The aliens who realized this began to panic. They asked themselves in fear, if humanity has turned itself into a signal, if they live inside their broadcast, then are they truly dead, or have they become immortal? The signal repeated again and again, but now the listeners could not hear it the same way. Now they heard the screams beneath the calm voice. Now they felt the sorrow hidden in the strength. Now they knew the truth. Earth was not silent. Earth had transferred its voice to the stars. The humans had refused to vanish. They had refused extinction. They had carved themselves into eternity. And yet the voice also carried a warning. What we have become cannot be undone. Understood. This was no gift. This was no triumph. This was a curse. Humanity had saved itself, but in doing so, it had destroyed what it once was. They were no longer human. They were something else. Something born from death, fire, and desperation. The rescuers felt guilt growing inside them. Had they started this? Had their mercy long ago planted the seed for this horror? If they had let humanity die in its weakness, perhaps the universe would be safer today. But it was too late now. The truth was hidden no longer. The broadcast itself became a living thing, spreading faster and faster, carried by its own energy. It slipped into alien computers. It whispered into their ships. It refused to be erased. It was not only a warning, it was an infection. And with every system it touched, with every mind that listened, the truth of humanity spread further. The voice returned, sharper than before. Do not come to us. Do not search for us. What we have unleashed cannot be undone. The aliens finally understood. The humans had not simply destroyed themselves. They had created something new. Something that could not be controlled. Something that should never be awakened. The hidden truth was clear now. The last broadcast of Earth was not only a message of doom, it was a mirror held to the universe. It said, "Look at us. Look at what mercy has created. Look at what we have become." And every species that heard it knew one thing in their bones. Humanity was no longer a race to be pitied. They were a shadow that could swallow the stars. The hidden truth had been revealed. The broadcast was not only sound, it was not only words. It was humanity itself, carried through the void, carved into light and code. But the question remained, was that they reach this state? How did an ordinary species, once weak and fragile, transform into something that lived inside signals, something that could not be undone? The answer was darker than anyone could imagine. Long before the final broadcast, humanity had begun to change. The broken world forced them to. On Earth, nothing was safe anymore. The air poisoned their lungs. The food was scarce. The diseases were endless. The old humanity could not survive, so they turned to science. Science that was never meant to be touched. Science that was called forbidden, even by their rescuers. At first it was small, a new medicine to extend life, a new chip to heal the brain, machines that could replace organs, circuits that could replace nerves. But soon, the line between flesh and metal blurred. What was once a tool became part of their bodies. What was once a cure became transformation. One survivor wrote in the early days, "We did not ask for this. We did not want this. But we cannot stay weak. If the world has become fire, then we must become fire to live in it." And so step by step, they changed themselves. They became faster, stronger, smarter. Their eyes could see in the dark. Their hands could bend steel. Their minds could think like machines. But with every change, something was lost. Every human who became stronger was a little less human than before. The aliens who studied the signal now understood. The humans had not been destroyed by war or famine. They had destroyed themselves with their own hunger to survive. With their own refusal to die, what began as survival became obsession. What began as protection became evolution. The forbidden experiments grew bolder. Minds connected together, not by speech, not by wires, but by thought itself. Whole cities turned into networks. Millions of people thought as one. Memories were shared like water. Pain was carried together. Dreams were no longer private, and when enough minds joined, something new was born. A collective will, a voice of many souls. A voice that could not be silenced. The broadcast itself was the result of this forbidden evolution. It was not only a signal, it was the mind of an entire species, bound together, refusing to die. The aliens who realized this whispered in terror, "They are no longer human. They are something else, something that should not exist." The voice spoke again, as if answering their fear. "We touched the stars, but in touching them, we burned." The sentence was filled with sorrow, but it was also filled with pride. Pride in what they had become. Pride in surviving when no one else could. Some empires debated. Should they destroy the signal? Should they erase all traces of humanity before the infection spread? But how could they erase something that was no longer a message? How could they kill something that was already everywhere? The forbidden evolution had made humanity eternal, not in flesh, not in bone, but in mind, in thought, in code. One alien admiral said with fear, "This is worse than weapons. This is worse than war. Humanity has turned itself into an idea. And ideas cannot be killed." Then in the silence that followed, no one disagreed. The humans had paid the ultimate price. They had lost their old selves. They had lost their old world. But in return, they had gained something more. A form that no empire could understand. A state that no power could erase. A voice that would echo long after the stars themselves burned out. The broadcast ended another cycle. The words repeated. Steady and merciless. Our fate was sealed. The moment we tried to become more than human. And with those words, the galaxy finally understood. The forbidden evolution of humanity was not only their doom, it was a warning of what happens when survival becomes obsession. It was a mirror held to every species, showing them the cost of reaching too far. But the humans were not asking for pity. They were not asking for forgiveness. They were not asking to be saved again. They had already chosen their fate. They had already embraced it. And now that fate would echo forever, carried. By the last broadcast of Earth, the signal did not fade. It grew sharper, stronger, and darker with each cycle. Every empire, every station, every fleet could hear it. There was no place in the galaxy where the human voice did not reach. And then the tone changed again. The words grew heavier. The voice grew colder. This was no longer a confession. This was no longer a story. This was a warning. The broadcast spoke. Do not come to us. Do not search for us. Do not step upon the ashes of Earth. What we have unleashed cannot be undone. If you find us, you will share our fate. The words hit like fire in the hearts of those who listened. It was not only a warning, it was a curse. The aliens who heard it trembled. They asked each other in fear, what fate had humanity sealed? What was unleashed? Why were they so certain that no one could survive it? No answer came. Only the steady, merciless voice of humanity repeating across the stars for the first time. In centuries, great empires paused their wars. They silenced their weapons. They listened together, as if the entire galaxy had become a single audience, because everyone knew the truth. The humans did not lie. They never spoke with such certainty before. But now, their words were iron. The warning spread panic. Some leaders demanded the destruction of the signal. Others demanded fleets be sent to Earth to uncover the truth. But the wiser ones only shook their heads. Do you not understand? One elder whispered. This signal is not asking us to come. It is daring us. It is testing us. And if we answer, we will not return. The broadcast continued unshaken. You saved us once. Do not make that mistake again. Do not open the door we have closed. The words carried weight like stone. They were not begging. They were commanding. In hidden corners of the galaxy, small groups still whispered of going to Earth. Treasure hunters. Curious explorers. Reckless warriors who believed the humans were bluffing. But even as they spoke, their machines began to fail. Those who tried to trace the signal found their systems breaking apart. Ships froze mid-flight. Data twisted into nonsense. Some crews vanished without a trace. It was as if the signal itself was defending the ruins of Earth. As if the warning was more than words. It was action. The aliens realized the most terrifying truth of all. The humans were not trying to stop them out of fear. They were trying to stop them out of mercy. Because whatever lived on Earth now was not for outsiders to see. One alien emperor stood before his people and said, "Listen to their warning. Humanity is gone. What remains is something born from ruin. If we step into their world, it will become ours, and none of us will escape it." His words spread across the stars, heavy as the broadcast itself, and still the voice of humanity did not stop. It repeated again, relentless and cold. What we have become cannot be undone. If you find us, you will share our fate. The warning carried no hope. It carried no escape. It was final. Empires shivered. Councils broke into silence. For the first time, entire civilizations realized they were not the masters of the stars. They were children, staring at the shadow of something greater, and that something was born from Earth. The broadcast became legend in the span of days. Some called it the voice of doom. Others called it the eternal curse. But all agreed on one truth. The humans had given the galaxy their last gift. Not salvation, not knowledge, but warning. In the endless dark, the signal echoed one final time in that cycle: do not come, do not follow, do not search. This is our final mercy. And then silence. But it was not a silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, spreading like fire from one world to another. Every empire asked the same question. Every leader whispered the same fear. What did the humans unleash? And none dared to find the answer. The voice ended. The signal faded. Into the endless dark, for the first time in centuries, there was silence. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of rest, but a silence filled with fear. Every empire, every world, every station waited. They waited for the broadcast to begin again. They waited for more words. But nothing came. Humanity had spoken its final message. And now, the galaxy was left with only silence. Yet silence was not comfort. It was worse than the voice itself, because silence meant mystery. Silence meant danger still hiding in the dark. Every leader asked the same question. Every scientist whispered the same thought. Was humanity truly gone, or were they still out there, waiting in the shadows, watching? No one could answer. Some believed. Earth was nothing but ruins, ashes, dust, and shadows. A dead world with no future. Others believed something still lived there. Not human, not machine, but something between. Something that remembered every scar. Something that carried the voice of billions. A collective will that could never die. Ships that tried to enter the Sol system were never seen again. Scouts who traced the signal vanished. Fleets that came too close reported strange visions. Voices in their minds, shadows in the stars, whispers of a species that refused to rest. And then, nothing. No survivors, no signals, only silence. The galaxy understood the warning was real, and so Earth became forbidden. No map dared to mark it, no ship dared to travel near it, but the fear did not fade. It grew. It would spread from world to world. Like a shadow, parents told their children, "Do not speak too loudly in the dark. Humanity may hear you." Soldiers whispered to each other before battle, "At least we do not face them. At least we do not wake what sleeps on Earth." And still, deep inside the hearts of the brave, curiosity burned. What had truly happened to humanity? What had they unleashed? What was waiting in the ruins of their world? Answer was ever found, because no one who searched ever returned. The broadcast became legend. Some called it a warning. Some called it a curse. But the wisest knew it was something more. It was a mirror. It's a mirror showing every species the cost of survival at any price. The cost of reaching too far, of becoming more than what they were. Meant to be, humanity had chosen that path. It walked it to the very end. And now they stood beyond it. Something unrecognizable. Something eternal. In the dark corners of the galaxy, old records were whispered about. Long ago, aliens had saved humanity. They gave them medicine, technology, hope. Humanity had promised to honor that gift. But now it seemed like a cruel joke, because the species once saved had become the one warning the galaxy itself. Unsaved had become the saviors in the most terrible way. The final silence stretched across the stars. But sometimes, if you listened long enough, if you tuned your machines carefully, you could almost hear it. A faint echo. A whisper. Do not come. Do not follow. This is our final mercy. And then silence again, unbroken. Eternal. The galaxy moved on. Empires rose and fell. Wars came and went. But none dared to test the silence of Earth, because silence is not always empty. Sometimes silence waits. Sometimes silence watches. Sometimes silence is the loudest warning of all. And in that silence, humanity remained. Not alive, not dead, but eternal. The last broadcast had ended, but its echo would never fade.